Hello and welcome to the Shaw Local Bears Insider Podcast. We are back. It's week 18. The end is near. I'm Sean Hammond, Shaw Local Bears beat reporter. He's Michael Dwojak, joining me as he does every Monday and Friday. This is our last Friday game preview episode, Michael. We've reached the end. Bears Packers this weekend. And maybe for the first time in a while, it feels pretty weird for a Bears-Packers week. It feels, I don't want to say meaningless, but kind of.
Yeah, it's funny, right? Just I feel like even like now we were just talking about like our plans for I feel like everyone's moved on ever since like Matt Eberflus kind of got fired, right? I feel like everyone's kind of known that. We're all looking for the head coaching search, who's going to be doing it and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure the holiday probably played a little bit of a role in that too, obviously. But after that covering that game on Thursday against the Seahawks, I haven't really cared or tried to care about the Bears. I've just kind of stayed away from it. Obviously, part of that's just just trying to stay away from work with some time off. But part of it's also just kind of like after that Seahawks game. Just what are you supposed to say at this point? What are the players supposed to say? What are we supposed to say? It's just one of those things where you kind of feel bad and you're just kind of like, do they need to play on Sunday, or like can they just like take the L, or both teams forfeit or whatever? So yeah, it's an interesting situation. It's definitely not one that we thought about. We thought this week, this final week game could determine whether the Bears would be going to be getting into the playoffs, but instead we're not looking forward to this game at all.
This was supposed to be a fun, stressful, important week for the Bears, and obviously they're instead on a 10-game losing streak, potentially ending the season with 11 straight. They've also lost, 11 straight against the Packers, I think. Yeah. So, it would be, I don't know if Jordan Love's going to play the whole game. We don't know exactly what the Packers are going to do. He is going to start there. The Packers can finish with either the 6th or the 7th seed. So not really that big of a difference. Just maybe depending on who their opponent might be. But really, it would be a weird way for this losing streak against the Packers to end if they do sit him in the second half or something crazy like that. But honestly, I said this like a week ago, and I still feel this way. Like, I don't know if the Bears could beat the Packers backups right now. Like, it's just the vibes are that bad, especially on the offensive side. We didn't do a recap of that Seahawks game, and I'm going to give you like a 5-second recap here. That was trash, and I don't ever want to talk about it again.
That was like I've seen so many people talk about it. That was like might have been one of the worst football games I've seen, and I've covered plenty of high school blowouts and that sort of stuff. Yeah. But that, I mean, all of it was bad. There's no need to talk about it really. It doesn't really matter at this point. But woof, that was tough.
That was real tough. If you're joining us here live on YouTube, do us a favor and hit the thumbs up. That's a great way to support the show. Please subscribe. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple after the fact, leave us a review and keep an eye on our Twitter pages. We'll let you know when we're going to go live. I'm at Sean_Hammond. He's at MDwojak94. We love joining you live here. I see some thoughts and comments already in the chat. We can hit a couple of these before we dive into some other stuff. Rick says it feels like 2 seasons have gone by. Yeah, I kind of get that. Mike Johnson asks, does DJ reach 1,000 yards? I'm going to pull up where exactly he is just for reference.
He's at 880 right now.
880. So, I mean, I would lean no.
Has he had a 100-yard game this year?
Did he have one
2.
Earlier? He's had 2. He had 105 against Carolina. He had 106 against Minnesota in the first overtime game against Minnesota. It's doable. It's possible. We've seen him have some big games. I don't know. It's going to be cold in Green Bay. It's not like weather-wise perfect conditions, obviously. And 100. So he needs 120. Is that the math on that? You said he's at 880.
880.
I lean no personally. I don't know. What do you think, Michael?
I feel like it says a lot about this season. The fact that I even had to ask if he had a 100-yard, 100-yard game this year. I mean, it's just. I mean, he's going to have a season high against the Packers. Sure. I mean, maybe there are a bunch of backups on defense, and maybe Caleb is kind of trying to enter the offseason in a good mode. So maybe it could happen, but I would probably, it feels like a 95-5 thing. I'm probably going to say 95% chance that's probably not going to happen. And maybe Caleb just wants to air it out and just kind of show like Ben Johnson or whoever that, this is what you're getting with me if you come here. And so maybe it could happen, but I don't give it too much, especially like Marlon mentions. All they seem to do is just throw screen passes to DJ. So I don't know how he's going to be able to accumulate 120 yards with just screen passes.
Yeah, I was thinking about this last time we were on, and I wanted to pull it up here. In the last 8 games, 6 of them, his average air yards per target are 6 yards, 0.9, 2.9. He had a 10-yard average against the Lions. I think, sometimes you throw one deep ball to a guy, it really skews this number.
Sure.
And then a 49ers game, he was 4.1 against the Vikings, 0.5 air yards per target. And then again, they threw another deep ball to him against the Lions, pulled that average over 10. 6 of those 8 games were under 10 yards per attempt. And you're right. Like Marlon's right. They're not throwing him the ball down the field for whatever reason. We're seeing him get the ball in those screen passes. They're lining up in the backfield. I have a hard time seeing how he gets to 120 yards in this game.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it's likely. But I don't. It just I don't know. It's kind of hard to get a vibe. We'll talk more about this in the second half because I know we want to talk some big picture stuff in the first half of this podcast. But it's kind of hard to get a vibe for what this game is going to be, right? Like this team. I don't want to say that they've given up because that's just too harsh of it's too harsh of a thing to say about NFL players. Like this is their livelihood. But it just hasn't been there. It feels like since Eberflus got fired, and it hasn't really been there since that Commanders Hail Mary loss. And I feel like it's just kind of hard for me to kind of believe that all of a sudden in a final game of the season against your rivals, I'm sure that's part of the factor of it, but all of a sudden in the finale, like things are going to look good and things are going to be happening. I don't. It's kind of hard for me to believe at this point.
I don't see that happening. And having been in that locker room yesterday, I mean, for me, like the feeling, the vibe was like last week of school before summer break. Like the music was loud. Yeah. And to be fair, it was a lot of the young guys, a lot of the practice squad guys. Like, I didn't see like DJ or Keenan or any of those guys, but like,
sure,
the music was blasting. Those guys were laughing. They were having a good time. It felt like the last week of school. And obviously, when you lose 10 straight, I mean, I think everyone has come to grips with what this season is. Nobody like if you can't mope in it forever. I get that, but at the same time, it didn't feel like a 4-12 football team yesterday. And I don't know if it should. I don't know what it should feel like. But this team has moved on. They're ready for the offseason. I think that's very, very clear just from the vibe in the room. Like it's time to put all this crap, all this drama with the Flus, the way everything went down with Waldron and Flus. These guys are ready to put all that behind them and move on to something new. They're ready for a new energy, I would say, because it's been a long time since there was a lot of positivity in that locker room, and I think that they're ready for that.
Yeah, and I feel like there should be some optimism, I guess, right? Like obviously, like this has been a terrible season. It didn't go the way you wanted, but there's a little bit of hope. And I feel like a lot of Bears fans that like I talk to or like hear from or whatever, it's interesting just to kind of see. I feel like everyone just expects the Bears to make this next hiring and it's going to be bad already. Like I feel like everyone is just expecting the worst, which I mean, I don't blame fans for feeling that way because I don't feel like there's been much that this franchise has given them hope for like the past 20 years, like ever since they had that blimp year in 2018. But other than that, like there's really been no hope, and I feel like fans are pretty defeated at this point. But I feel like it does probably have that end of school year vibe because that once Monday happens, the off season starts. You're looking for your new head coach. You might be looking for a new general manager. TBD. We'll talk about that. But there's an opportunity to move on, right? There's an opportunity to kind of turn the page and get this thing on the right track. And for the past month and a half, and honestly for the past couple months, just this half season, it's kind of felt like, when is this season going to end? I'm kind of done with this. This is so
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah. No, it absolutely has. And we can talk about some of that big picture stuff. I did want to hit on a comment really quick from let's see, from Robert. He was saying yeah, we beat the Packers. Obviously the streak ends, but you're hurting your draft pick. That's an interesting point. At this point, it's sad that we're talking draft picks, because that's not what we expected to be talking at the end of this season. But yeah, the Bears right now are sitting at number 9. Michael, it's really interesting. There's a lot of bad football teams this year. There's 9 teams with 3 or 4 wins right now.
Yeah, I've been kind of looking at the, overall standings and the draft positioning over the past couple of weeks just to kind of see where the Bears are. And when I first started looking, I feel like you don't kind of realize this when you're kind of just in your Bears world and you're kind of covering them. And like you see the big highlights around the league, but there's a lot of bad football. And like, this is a really, like, it feels like a mediocre league this year, where you're just kind of having a bunch of, a lot of 10-win teams and a bunch of like 3 or 4 win teams. Like, it is insane to me.
It's very boom or bust.
And the Bears are realistically probably a game and a half away from the number 1 overall pick again. And imagine saying that, at the beginning of this season. It's just insane that this team could potentially be like a game and a half out of the first overall pick. And they're going to be choosing probably around 9 because of the way the tiebreakers kind of work and those early wins against the Titans, the Panthers, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, if this was an 18-game season, they would definitely still be in play for that worst pick, which is there's just a lot of bad teams. Yeah, it does feel very boom or bust. I mean, you look at the standings a year ago, the NFC, the teams tied for that number 1 seed had 12 wins. And this week, or this season, I mean, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 teams already with 13 wins this season. It's very boom or bust. You got teams at the top that have these great records. That's going to be an exciting game between the Vikings and the Lions on Sunday night. And then you have these teams, the Patriots, the Titans, the Browns, the Giants are all sitting at 3 and 13. The Jags, the Panthers, the Jets, the Raiders, and the Bears are right behind them at 4 and 12. There's a lot of bad football right there. There's a lot of bad football. But you know what? Maybe that segues into some of our big picture talk here. We're not gonna have a show on Monday. We're gonna be up at House Hall doing end of the year stuff. That's the last time we'll get to talk to some of these players. So we'll try to join you guys sometime next week. But Michael, Ryan Poles has been the talking point these last couple of weeks. I personally feel like Bears fans have just run out of people to blame, and so they're pointing the finger at him because he's the only guy left. But realistically, I mean, what do you think? Is there any chance the Bears move on from Ryan Poles after this Week 18 game?
If you take what Kevin Warren said at face value, then no, right? Like, he said at that, he could have very easily at that point in that press conference after they fired Matt Eberflus, he could have said, we're going to evaluate everything. I'm going to evaluate everything. Like, he wanted to make that press conference about himself. So he could have easily said, listen, I'm the team president. I'm going to evaluate everything with ownership. And then at the end of the year, we're going to make a decision on the future of the franchise. And he decided to say, like, Ryan Poles is the point guy on. Well, in a way, obviously it took him a couple minutes to get to that point, but he did say that Ryan Poles is going to spearhead this search and that he is in charge of football operations. So if you take Kevin Warren for what he says at face value, Ryan Poles is going to come back. But I feel like it just comes to, it's an interesting thing at this point where it's kind of like, if you're bringing in Ben Johnson, Mike Vrabel, Joe Brady, Cohen, all that kind of stuff, you have to essentially give Ryan Poles a contract extension, right? Like, no coach is going to come here unless they're guaranteed that that GM is going to stick around for, as long as they are, or at least the next couple of years, right? But then you also have the conflict of Ryan Poles at this point owns 2 of the franchise's top 2 longest losing streaks, right? And obviously with the context of the first year being it was going to be a rebuild year, that was never going to be a win year, like that, there's context to that. But if the Bears lose on Sunday, they're going to set the franchise record for most consecutive losses within a season. Obviously, I know that a couple of years ago, it went to 14 games or 13 games over a couple of seasons. But like, it just feels weird then to kind of give a contract extension to the coach or to the general manager who has that distinction, right? And obviously we've talked about, yes, you got Caleb Williams, but other than that, what have you kind of seen on this roster that kind of has you encouraged? So that's a long way of saying that I think that he'll stay, and I think that Kevin Warren is going to keep him. I think the McCaskies obviously like Poles and think that he's young and up and coming, but it just makes me a little itchy and scratchy. The worst case thing you can do is not give him a contract extension, I think, because that just sets you behind the bar. It's going to continue to do what you need to do, what you've been doing for so long. But at the same time, it just feels weird and kind of wrong to kind of give him a contract extension when, other than trading for Caleb Williams, DJ Moore, what have you kind of shown here that has kind of grown into, successful, players in the future?
Yeah, he's definitely, he's a young GM who has been learning on the job. I know he had a lot of good experience in Kansas City, but you don't really know what that job is like until you're in it. No. None of us really know what that is like because we haven't been in it, in his shoes. And yeah, there's going to be mistakes made. I'm sure he regrets some of the moves. We don't have to really go into it. Chase Claypool, Nate Davis, some of those things just really did not work out. At the end of the day, this comes down to whether or not the Bears still believe in him and whether or not, the Bears like him. And I think that they do. I think that every indication, obviously the McCaskies hired him, so they clearly like him. This is going to come down to what Kevin Warren wants to do, really, because they made this deal. They put Kevin Warren in charge of the operation, of the football team. He's making all these decisions. Obviously, that's going to have to come with the blessing of the McCaskey family. George McCaskey's not gonna give him complete control, of course, but if Kevin Warren wants to move on, they probably will. I don't see any reason why they would do that. I think that they have to see this thing out with Caleb and with Ryan Poles. Get the right coach in here and see what you can do. Like, I don't think that you can just. A GM should have two coaches. Obviously, yeah, you want his first hire to work out, but he hired the guy within 48 hours of taking the job. I think you got to give him another chance to really do his own search. And just logistically, what that looks like right now, I mean, they've had 5 weeks to put together their lists, Kevin Warren and Ryan Poles, to start thinking about where they want to take this thing. They cannot interview coaches who work for other teams until after week 18. So, the only people that they could have been reaching out to were college coaches or coaches who were not employed by a team, such as Bill Belichick before he took the UNC job. Mike Vrabel was working for the Browns, so he wasn't even eligible to be interviewed. I believe that contract ran out before week 18. I imagine that was probably planned by Mike Vrabel.
Yeah.
And
he's interviewed with the Jets.
He's interviewing with the Jets today on Friday. So starting Monday, they can request interviews with guys who work for other teams. That would be your Ben Johnsons and those coordinators who you're going to really be looking at when you're thinking about the up and coming coaches. I don't know where Pete Carroll fits into that. He's technically an analyst or a consultant for the Seahawks still. I don't know if that means that he's not available to interview till after the season either. But anyway, the ball is going to get rolling on Monday, and some of these interviews are going to happen before ideally you want your first interviews to be done before the divisional round, just with how the rules are laid out, because if you don't do that, then you might get stuck. If they don't interview Ben Johnson before the divisional round, they could be stuck not interviewing him till after the Super Bowl. And that's obviously they don't want that situation to play out. Anyway, that's a long-winded way of saying they've been thinking about this, but it's going to move really quickly here over the next couple of weeks.
And it feels like, they, like you've said, they've put in the work at this point, right? So it doesn't really make sense for Ryan Poles, you would have assumed, for him to put in 5 weeks of work or however long it's been, and then on Monday to just be like, forget that. Like, let's just start at the beginning again, and let's just get a new guy. And then
exactly.
It doesn't make sense. And the only reason I would even consider moving on from him is if a Ben Johnson is like, listen, like I want I know that he's been linked with the Detroit assistant GM, right? I want my own guy. I want him in there. Maybe you listen to that. Maybe if Vrabel is like, I want some, because there's the more modern NFL also has a lot of head coaches like working with guys that they know, right?
Yeah.
And Ryan Poles doesn't really have a relationship. It seems like, well, I'm sure they've talked to these guys and that sort of stuff in the past, but other than Brian Flores, they were teammates at Boston College. He doesn't really have a past working relationship with a lot of these guys. So it'll be interesting to see just kind of how this whole process unfolds because, as much as the Bears are going to be interviewing these guys, I feel like if you're a candidate like Ben Johnson or you're even like Mike Vrabel, you're talking to the Bears and you're like, what is Ryan Poles doing? What is his role? What is the vibe in this building? How are we going to make sure that what has been happening here in the past 11, 12, 20, 50 years doesn't continue to happen here and we can develop Caleb the way they need to?
Exactly. I love what you said at the beginning because that's exactly it. Like if you're a Bears fan who wants to move on from Ryan Poles, then you're signing up for another situation where you're going to have GM interviews and head coaching interviews happening concurrently at the same time. And it's going to be the same thing again, where they're going to hire the GM and 24, 48 hours later, they're going to tell the GM, okay, these were our favorite candidates for the head coach that we already interviewed. Who do you like?
Right.
It's going to be the same thing over again. If you move on from the GM, that's exactly it. They've had 4 to 5 weeks to make this list. You can start requesting interviews on Monday. You can start interviewing 3 days after a coach's season ends. So if any of those coaches did not make the postseason, that would be either Tuesday or Wednesday, depending if they play Saturday or Sunday. You got to get moving here. Like you don't have time. If you're going to also hire a GM, you're going to have to do them both at the same time, or you're going to be interviewing candidates at a later schedule than some of these other teams.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I think it's pretty simple, right? Like, I think you just kind of, as soon as the game ends on Sunday, you obviously just kind of jump into things and you start scheduling, within the rules, obviously, of the NFL. You start, if I'm Ryan Poles, if I'm Kevin Warren, I'm scheduling Ben Johnson's interview as quick as possible. I'm talking to Mike Vrabel, next week. Obviously, they had the opportunity to talk to him this week. And obviously, the Jets are talking to him on Friday. So we'll see what that kind of looks like. But I'm reaching out to, Liam Cohen. I'm reaching out to Joe Brady. I'm reaching out to Brian Flores. I'm reaching out to anyone that I'm interested in. And the other thing that I think is kind of interesting in all of this is I'm not getting worried if a team continues to win and you have to wait, right?
No, you shouldn't.
I think that, and I'm not saying that this was kind of the case with Matt Eberflus a couple of years ago, but it was quick, right? Like they hired Poles, and then a couple of days later, 48 hours later, they hired Matt Eberflus. And I know the comparison's been made a lot with, the Minnesota Vikings, who were doing the same exact thing. They waited until Kevin O'Connell was done with the Super Bowl, right? To obviously in the week before, you can kind of work through negotiations and that kind of stuff, but you can't officially announce anything until after the Super Bowl. But I don't care if you have to wait and the Detroit Lions go all the way to the Super Bowl and Ben Johnson's your guy. You wait until the very end and you give him the money that he wants, and you make sure that it happens, because you can't be afraid of waiting. You can't be afraid of, well, maybe this guy won't be able to get this full coaching staff. If you believe in the guy and you think that they can make a difference for Caleb and for your franchise, it doesn't really matter how much money they want, realistically, or, what the time frame is. You need to get him, because like Kevin Warren said like a month ago, this is a pretty significant coaching hire for both your franchise, just both with the development of Caleb Williams and where you are at this point.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And like I said at the top, you have to interview Ben Johnson as soon as possible because once you get to the conference championship round, those coaches cannot do interviews that week. They cannot do interviews the week of the Super Bowl. You have to get those first interviews in, these first couple of weeks before the divisional round. And obviously we all expect the Lions to potentially go pretty far in the playoffs. I know that's not guaranteed, but I would expect that they're going to be in the NFC Championship, potentially in the Super Bowl. That's if you are interested in some of the logistics of how it works. I do have a story coming out tomorrow on Saturday. Head to shawlocal.com. You can read exactly what the rules are for how all this works. I know it's a little bit nitty gritty football stuff, but if you're here with us, you're deep in the weeds anyway. So we appreciate you joining us. I do see a comment from Robert, and actually, let's see. I want to scroll back up. Robert did have a question about what we're going to be up to. Yeah, we are going to keep doing shows during the off season. We're kind of hoping maybe once a week. That will kind of ebb and flow based on what time of year it is. Obviously, once we get into free agency and the draft, I think we'll be joining you guys at least once a week. But definitely throughout the coaching search, like there's going to be plenty to talk about. And so we're gonna keep joining you guys. So stick with us. We appreciate you guys jumping on here live and chatting with us. Robert Phillips had another question in here that I guess I kind of want to hear from the room, see what some of the other folks think. Are you happy that we're starting Caleb against the Packers? Yeah, like there's always an injury concern when you're throwing out a guy onto the football field. Like in the NFL, guys get hurt. Obviously, if Caleb Williams were to suffer a bad injury, a torn ACL, something like that, knock on wood, not trying to jinx anything, but that would affect next season at this point. And so that's a risk that you have to weigh. I absolutely think you have to be thinking about that. I'm okay with him starting this game. I don't know if the Packers pull their starters in the second half, I might do the same personally. What do you think, Michael?
I don't think you bench him. I don't think that there's something to say about, is he getting valuable experience in these games and like this wonky, format and the coaching firing and that kind of stuff. Like, is there value to it? And I think there is, right? Like there's value to seeing a pass rush, seeing coverages and that kind of stuff. And honestly, there's value to just building confidence into the offseason, right? Like you go through this 10-game losing streak. There's some highs. I don't know how many highs there were. There were a bunch of lows.
There were way back when. There were some good moments.
Well, even in the losses, even at the beginning of the losing streak, where Caleb played well and he brought this team back, right? And you kind of want to see that again, where I feel like the last couple of weeks, ever since Eberflus got fired, I'm not putting it all on Caleb or anything like that, but it hasn't been good, right? Like he hasn't really guided the team over the hump or anything like that. So I think there's something to gaining experience in this game. Listen, if he's being harassed and the offensive line can't protect him, maybe you put Tyson Bagent in there. If he's
getting sacked 7 times again,
yeah. I mean, you don't really want to head into the offseason with the sack record. What is it, like 9?
He would need 9
games, right?
He would need 9 to tie the record.
I think if you're Thomas Brown at that point, if you're even sniffing 5, you're just like, get out. Like we're not letting you break the record. There's no need for you to be in this game right now. But
9,
I do think
9 sounds crazy, but let's remember that he was sacked 9 times against the Patriots.
Yes. But there is value, I think, going to Green Bay, being in that environment, seeing what it's like play. Like in a year from now, it's good to have that experience of going through warm-ups at Lambeau in the cold, getting ready for, knowing what the circumstances are. Like, I think it's like, you can say like, well, what is he really going to get from that? But there might be some value in getting some familiarity, being like, the locker room's here. This is how I like to do things at Lambeau. This is how the setup is in Lambeau. This is what it's kind of like. And this is how I'm going to prepare myself if there is a big game next season, right at the end of the season, or that kind of stuff. Like, I think there's value through just going through experiences and being familiar with things for your future. Sure, this game might not matter and you're not going to like change anything, but there is value in going through the pregame routine, through going against defenses that'll benefit you in the future.
Yeah. And look, you expect to win in Green Bay in the future. Yeah. Like you expect Caleb Williams to be the quarterback who can flip this rivalry, or at least let's start by saying pull it a little bit more even. And you're going to have to try to win some games in Green Bay to do that. That's the place that they're going to be playing every single year. Yeah. I fully expect Caleb to start the game. I'd be curious to see, based on the ebb and flow of the game, whether or not he plays the whole time. Marlon Harris in the comments thinks that Tyson Bagent wouldn't take a single sack. I don't know about that. It would be honestly, I would like to see we didn't really get to see Tyson this year, and I would like to see where he's at. But also I understand why you're playing Caleb. Like I get it. But I would like to kind of see where Tyson Bagent is, because we haven't really seen him all year.
Going off of that, do you kind of like the approach that Thomas Brown's kind of taken where, I feel like he's been asked the last couple of weeks about, are you going to see more developmental guys, more younger guys and that kind of stuff? And he's kind of been on the mindset that if the veterans are healthy, they're going to play. What are your thoughts about that? Do you like that? Like, are you kind of like, well, Keenan Allen might not be here next year. Maybe we need to see more Tyler Scott or whatever, like, have you, like, do you want to see Kieran kind of get in there? Like, what are your thoughts about, like, maybe about them deciding to stick with the veterans as opposed to maybe getting some younger guys so you can kind of see what your younger guys are doing?
My thoughts are they should be playing the young guys, but my concurrent thought is, who else might not be here next year? Probably won't be, is Thomas Brown. And I think he is trying to pad his resume for his next job as well. I think, I don't think there's a huge difference between going 1-4 and going 0-5. But 0-5 certainly looks bad as the interim head coach. Not that 1-4 looks all that much better, but I think he's trying to win football games. He's got this golden opportunity to be an interim head coach. His goal should be to win as many games as he can. So I do kind of get it from that perspective. But I agree. Like if you had your head coach of the future, if your coach wasn't going anywhere, I would absolutely play the youngest. I would play Tyler Scott. I would play Karan Amagaji. I don't know. I mean, we don't have to get into the Karan stuff, but I think I would be comfortable playing Karan if you had a full week of practice. We obviously that wasn't the case in that Minnesota game, and he got the short end of the stick there. But I would be happy with playing some of those young guys. I absolutely think so.
Because you need to see what you have, right? Like this is like. We can talk about this obviously in next week's episode and obviously off-season episodes about who we think is going to stay, who's going to come back or whatever. But listen, like the last month has been a good evaluation period for Ryan Poles to see what he has. Like not even like the production on the field, but like what have players been like in the locker room during down times? Have they been, positive? Have they kind of kept things down or have they kind of let the moment kind of sink in? And obviously I know, it's easy for us to say like we don't go through the day-to-day, we don't go through, the losing and that kind of stuff as much as players do, but you're learning a lot about your team right now, and there's a lot of evaluations to be made, and you got to see whether Kieran can play, whether Javon Dexter can kind of get in there. Like he was a healthy scratch last week, right? Like at some point you got to see
Zach Pickens.
Say Zach Pickens, yeah, my bad. At some point you just need to see what these top picks are because at this point, not many of them are clicking right now for Ryan Poles.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. What about another name too, who I'd love to see Austin Booker get a few more snaps. He's been playing roughly 20% of snaps down the stretch here. Like I'd like to see him, get a couple more opportunities, see what he can do. I'm all for playing some of the young guys when the season, like it's over. We all know that. Going back to the top, like the players know that, like just having been in that locker room yesterday, like they know that this is over. And Marlon says he's seen enough of Zach Pickens. I kind of feel like, he's had opportunities. I do agree with that. And it's gone the way it's gone. He hasn't done a whole lot. Mike Johnson said that Detroit announced their arrival by beating the Packers in the last game a few years ago. Yeah, sure. That could be, if the Bears do win this game, that would be somewhat of a statement, assuming that the Packers try to win and play Jordan Love the whole game. At the same time, so much is going to change. You don't have a head coach right now. And so it's hard to really build off of anything, I feel like.
Yeah, it'll be interesting just to see what they decide to do. And with that and that kind of stuff, with what Zach Pickens has done and other guys have done, it'll at some point you just kind of need to see what they have, but it'll be interesting to see what they do, especially if, for the Packers, there is seeding, right? So they're going to get a little bit.
There's a difference.
Yeah. And obviously I think it's either the 6th seed or the 7th seed. So there's something to play for, and you don't really want to have to be that 7th seed heading into the playoffs with, what are they, like 12 win or 13 win team at this point?
Yeah, it will matter. I believe the Eagles are locked into the 2 seed as well. So that is something to keep in mind.
Sure.
When you're looking at that, whether you're the 6th or the 7th seed for the Packers. We got about 10 minutes left here. I do want to roll through our final pregame segments here. It feels a little anticlimactic doing this for this somewhat meaningless game, but let's do it, Michael. Game within the game. What are you watching? What position battles? Who are you paying attention to?
I'm going to be consistent. I'll just go with Caleb, right? That's what I've been saying. That's what I've been saying for the past 3 weeks. And to be honest, I haven't liked what I haven't disliked. Like nothing that I've seen over the past few games has made me be like, well, is Caleb not the guy? He's the guy. Yeah. Like he's your quarterback. But I would have liked to see more. And there's still some yes, he's being pressured, but he even talked about it this week where he's kind of tired of his offensive line getting flack for all the sacks, where he's admitted and said a bunch of those sacks are on me. And that's kind of one thing that I've kind of been concerned about, where I've kind of wanted that to get better and for his accuracy to get better. And you haven't seen that really. He's still taking some sacks that he shouldn't be taking. And there's still some miscommunication or off throws, right? So, it could be fool's gold if you do end up playing well this week, obviously, especially if you're going against backups. But I do want to see some tangible things from Caleb this week that kind of have me encouraged and kind of have him encouraged heading into the offseason, where he's avoiding some sacks. He's getting rid of the ball quicker. He's accurate on some deep passes that I think you can build off of and kind of work through once you kind of get back together for OTAs, mini camp, and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, look, anyone who's tuning in for this game is who's still watching this team is doing it because of Caleb Williams. And sure. So, yeah, I'm 100% with you. I'm watching what Caleb is doing. I'll join Mike in the comments here. He's watching DJ go for 1,000 yards. Sure, I'll throw that in the ring too. I don't think he'll get there, but if it's important to him, maybe they will force feed him the ball. He's their guy moving forward. He's under contract for 6 years. They want to keep him happy. If he wants to go for 1,000 yards, I'm sure that they will have opportunities to do that. Rome Odunze has been sick this week. That's another thing to keep in mind when you're talking about the receivers. Also, Kyler Gordon has been sick too. There's something going around the building, it seems. It's that time of year. The only other major injury concern is Tevin Jenkins has still got the calf injury. He has not practiced this week.
Do you feel like he's played his final game with the Bears?
Quite possibly. I'd have to dig into similar comps to look at what kind of contracts they got. I don't think the Bears are going to break the bank for him. No. If they can get him at a somewhat friendly deal, I think they would bring him back. But yeah, he's missed a lot of time. I mean, I know he gets crap for missing a lot of time. He hasn't missed that much time this season. He's played in 14 games. It's looking like it's probably going to be 14. That's the most he's played in his whole career. And I get it. You want guys to play 17 games, but offensive linemen are hurt a lot. And so I feel like he deserves a little bit of props for being relatively healthy this year, but I don't know that's going to be enough to bring him back.
No. And maybe you bring him back on not a minimum, but you're definitely not putting a top tier contract for him. And I don't really know who else around the league would do that for him, right? Just given his injury past. And yes, I know obviously he's played more, but he still has ended up on the injury report a lot this year. And it's been an okay performance. So yeah, it was just interesting just to kind of see what they're going to decide to do with that. Because at this point, you're probably sticking with Darnell Wright, and you're just trying to figure out what else is going to work on that offensive line.
Yeah, next year. I would expect that they are going to approach the offensive line both in free agency and in the draft in multiple ways. I mean, you got money to spend, you're going to spend it. That's what it's for. And you especially after the way this season has gone, there's going to be an urgency to get that fixed. And I think that they will look at all their options there. Okay, most valuable Bear. That Thursday game feels like a long time ago, Michael. I had DJ Moore. You had Caleb Williams. And DJ Moore scored 9.2 fantasy points in half PPR. Caleb Williams scored 6.5. Ooh. I got the victory. I have clinched. Tough. I have won. It's 9-7 going into the last week of the season.
Should have listened to Rick a couple weeks ago. That was my bad.
I'll work on my postseason victory speech for next time. We can hand out the trophy that doesn't exist yet. This is a victory for me. So I'm going to pat myself on the back, and I'm going to turn it over to you. It is your week to pick first. Who you got? Who's your most valuable Bear?
I'll go with DJ because we're all feeling it and we're all hoping he gets to 1,000 yards. And I just don't like anything else that I've seen. Well, I can't take Caleb, obviously. And I looked at DeAndre Swift's numbers. They're not good. Rome's sick, so he might not be at 100%. I was debating between Keenan Allen or maybe DJ Moore, but I'll go with DJ Moore. I feel like there might be an incentive. I can't guarantee that there is, but there might be an incentive, and he might be motivated to get some extra money if he gets close to over 1,000 yards.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's a really good pick. I can also not pick Caleb. We have exhausted our Caleb Williams picks. We did three each was the maximum this season. You know what? I'm actually gonna do something that neither of us have done in a while. I'm gonna go on the defensive side. I'm gonna take the Pro Bowler. I'm gonna take Jalen Johnson. Here's an interesting stat. Jordan Love has not thrown an interception since he saw the Bears. Remember midway through the season, he threw a pick in every single game up until that Bears game. And since then, he has not thrown an interception. I think Jalen Johnson's going to get a pick, end his season on a positive note. It would feel like a good way for him to end the year. And hey, he's coming off a high. He made the Pro Bowl. That's good for him. Obviously, that's a lot of respect for a cornerback because look, he's only got 2 picks this year. Like that tells you that the people, the coaches and the players who are watching the tape, they know how good he is.
Yeah, and you see it in the numbers, right? Like, isn't he one of the top, if not the top, like cornerbacks that is being not being thrown to?
Yes.
Like, people are deliberately avoiding him. Like, they're not throwing the ball near Jalen Johnson as much as any other cornerback in the league, I think.
He has 52 targets in 16 games. I'm not a math guy, but that's not a lot. That's what, like three per game or something like that.
Sure.
And according to the Bears, that they put out a stat among cornerbacks who have started at least 13 games, that is the fewest targets. And yeah, obviously we all know this. Opponents are going after Tyreek Stevenson. They're going after Kyler Gordon. They're going after some of these other guys, and they're staying away from Jalen Johnson. I'm taking Jalen this week.
I think it's a good pick. I mean, if you're going to choose a defensive player, like I saw Rick chose Montez Sweat. I don't hate that pick. He's kind of been MIA for half a year at this point. Like he's had some moments or whatever, but I think injuries have kind of hurt him. But I feel like if you're going to choose a defensive guy, I like Jalen Johnson's pick. Though Kyler Gordon has been pretty good, like Robert mentions.
Yeah, Kyler's been good. This is a good game to pat your stats too. We all know how much those defensive ends value their sacks. Montez is sitting at 5.5 this season. Probably not the season he was envisioning when things started. You pick up 2 more. 7.5 looks a lot better than 5.5. Okay, surprise prediction, Michael. You got any surprise predictions heading into this game? Something we're not talking enough about. I'm
not going to go as crazy as to say that the Bears win this game, but I do think that it's a close game. I don't think it's a blowout. I think the offense shows some light that are going to leave people being like, where has this been all year long? And I think that's my biggest thing, where I think the spread is like 6.5 points. I forget what it is. I think the Bears cover, and I don't think they'll win, but they're not going to get blown out. And I think it's going to be a closer loss than maybe some people might expect it to be.
Some other surprise predictions coming in. Rick says an opening drive touchdown. That's been a favorite. Yeah, that would be a surprise, and that would be a funny way to end the year. Robert has Cole Kmet getting 100 yards. I like that. Marlon says surprise pick, a special teams touchdown. All right, I like that. Mike says defense scores a safety. Yeah, we have we seen a safety this year? I don't think we have either for or against the Bears.
No.
I am going to go with the ultimate surprise. I think Caleb Williams is sacked 2 or fewer times. I don't know why. That's where my head's going. But you know what? Sometimes these narratives get talked about and overblown. And I know it was really bad last game. But I think that, Caleb, it's like they come in bunches this season. There's been games where he wasn't sacked a lot, and then there's been multiple games where he sacked 6, 7, 9 times. I think coming off that poor performance last week, I think that Caleb will play a relatively clean game and keep his eyes downfield, get the ball out of his hands.
Yeah, I could see that. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it does feel like he's been sacked a lot over the past few games. So, I could see that happening, especially if the Packers decide to rest some of their defensive players. Maybe you're not able to get as much of a pass rush against this offensive line as you would if you were playing all your starters.
He had 7. Let's just go since Flus was fired, these 4 games, 7 against the 49ers. He had only 2 against Minnesota and only 2 against Detroit, and then 7 more against Seattle. It really has been coming in bunches. That's one. Like I said, I'm not a math guy, but I'm going to try to add this up really quick. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 games with 6 or more sacks. If my math is correct there, that's they come in bunches. They come in bunches. Michael, what's your prediction and your score for this one?
I'll go with the Packers win. I think the losing streak goes to 12 against the Packers, 11 overall this season, new franchise record, all the good stuff. I think the Packers win. Let's make it a 21-17 game. I think it's relatively close toward the end. Bears aren't able to get it going, but I haven't been left encouraged at all, especially after that, game against the Seahawks. That was a winnable game that you just kind of blew at the end with poor management and poor execution. And it's tough. And I know it's obviously not what people want to hear, but I think that's just the cherry on top of a bad season. You just lose to your rival. You set a franchise record and you lose your 12 straight to them.
Yeah, I am less optimistic that the Bears are going to keep this thing close. I feel like this team is ready for the offseason. I'm taking the Packers. I honestly haven't thought about the score, but as I'm thinking about it now, I'm going to go something like, I don't know, 27-17, something like that. I do think that this will probably be a double-digit win for the Packers, assuming that they do, keep their starters in. Jordan Love plays the whole game. I think the Packers will win this relatively easily. I do think that they probably want to win this game. If you're the 7 seed, you're going at Philadelphia. That's a little bit tougher than it looks like. The Rams are probably going to be the 3 seed, but it's hard. Like, you can't. Weird things happen. Even if they win, they might not move up a seed. But I still think that this Bears team is checked out. I think they're ready for the offseason. I have zero confidence that they're going to keep this close.
How about the Rams too, right? Like, this is a team that the Bears are beating, and they kind of handled and limited Matthew Stafford. And what a run they've kind of gone on. That's a nice win. You kind of look at back in the season, you're like, why weren't we able to continue that? Again, obviously, the Rams figured some things out, and they didn't have Cooper Kupp or Nakua against the Bears. But
they were pretty injured back then.
That was a nice win back in the day. Remember that?
The NFL, man. The NFL, man, there's always weird results. There's always weird results. That was man, this team was 4-2. Can you believe that? Here we are. All right. I think that's go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, what's your prediction? Is Poles here on Monday? Does he meet the media?
I don't know if he meets the media on Monday, but he'll be the one hiring the coach. I do believe that. Okay. What do you think?
No, I would agree. I think that everything we've kind of been led to believe, I think that I feel like it'd be pretty, I wouldn't say shocking, but it'd be pretty surprising if on Sunday night, Monday morning, we get like Adam Schefter and Rappaport.
I would be shocked
that they would fired by that. Like that would be pretty surprising.
I would be shocked. I know that's been talked about a lot the last couple of weeks, but I've never thought that is really where this is heading. So personally, I would be surprised after trotting him out there with Kevin Warren 5 weeks ago and all that stuff. I just don't see that happening. Yeah. But we will find out, and we will come. We'll join you guys again next week. Thanks if you've lasted this long. Thanks for listening with us. Hit the thumbs up on YouTube. We really appreciate you guys joining the show live. If you're listening after the fact on Spotify or Apple or wherever you get your podcast, keep an eye on our Twitter pages. We'll let you know when we're going to go live. I'm at Sean_Hammond. He is at mdwojak94. And as always, head over to shawlocal.com to read all of our work. That is the #1 best way to support us. Please consider subscribing over at shawlocal.com, and you can read all of our Bears coverage. He's Michael Dwojak. I'm Sean Hammond. This has been the Shaw Local Bears Insider Podcast. Thanks for joining us, everybody, and try to enjoy the last Bears game of the season.